A couple of weeks ago, I watched the 60 Minutes report on Abrego Garcia being deported to El Salvador. It was a really good story, but when I finished watching it, I was literally sick to my stomach. And I felt something I have never felt before, which is I'm ashamed to be American. And maybe that sounds like unpatriotic to you or something like that, but I was just like, how could we do this to people? Uh, the report, if you haven't seen it, just makes very clear that most of these people were not violent. Most of them had no records of wrongdoing at all. They were sexually abused, they were tortured, and all of this, just we ignore, we just like turn a blind eye to this. And I'm like, how can I sit here in this chair and pretend like everything's okay? I just I'm so ashamed to be a part and to be part of a country that treats people this way. Um, this morning I woke up and I hear we have invaded Venezuela, captured their leader. I get that he's no, jewel, that he's a horrible person and all. So was Saddam Hussein. But I just see our nation doing things now that I just find so hard to take. And it literally hurts because it's so against the way I grew up thinking about being an American. Now, what do I do with this? How are we supposed to process this? And as I'm doing this whole facing up thing, the reason I'm talking about this morning is because I think that one thing that I hate about religions and philosophies is that they strike me as being an escape from reality, turning your back, sort of like, going to your happy place. And so I want to talk to you today about how facing up informs the way I think about what's going on in our world right now. I want to back up and just remind you that human beings exist on three levels. We are creatures of desire. So on one level, we're animals, right? We are driven by desire. But we are more than that, and our superpower is that we have consciousness. We are able to tell stories, and these stories shape our desires and they harness our desires. And so we live in past, present, and future, and we tell stories about ourselves, whether it's like a religious story that I grew up in, or a story of the United States, or the story of my career, or whatever. But we are in this stream, and this isn't a bad thing. This is human. We think and act in story. So that's the second level, desire, story. But the shift that I keep talking about is when the story breaks down. When we recognize that, oh my goodness, these stories that I have built my life on, these stories that I thought were truth with a capital T, they break. And it could break by something like's going on right now, where our country is shifting in a drastic way. And wait a minute, this story of America, what is it anymore? In fact, you could almost say that the conflict that we have right now in our nation is a debate over which story will be our story. Will it be the story of Make America Great Again, going back to the 50s and this imagined, goodness, or will it be this liberal story, which, is blown out of proportion, but still, is this like just really affirming fluid, I can't think of the word, fluid gender, and like making everyone put their pronouns after their name, and so like there's this other story which has been pushed as well, and it's like, wait a minute, that's not my story. Well, whose story are we going to operate by? And so there's this conflict, and it's really at the story level. What story are we going to tell about being an American? Well, that's just the national story. Well, personal stories break up too, and it could be illness that comes into your life. It could be a betrayal by someone you love. There's also ways that our personal stories break. And of course, this whole channel, for a large part, the one that fell apart on me was my religious story, my whole religious framework that gave me a sense of place and belonging in this world. And through a long process that I detailed in previous episodes, that shattered on me. When the story breaks, okay, we have desire, we have story, we are humans, we live and think in story. But what happens when the story is shaken? Well, we try to replace it with another story, but what happens when that story gets broken? And then the next one, and you get to a place where you realize, wait a minute, this story that we tell about our existence is it's a human conception, and it's fragile, and they always break. So yikes, this is the dark night. This is the terror of facing the fact that the very foundation of our life, the storied foundation of our life, is not what we thought it was. And that is what casts us into the dark night, where we're just like lost and without a story. And this is the journey to the third level of being human, which is human beings. I mean, it's interesting we call ourselves that. We know that we are more than our story. And this becomes very existential. And the decision at the being level is, will I accept that I am a creature who does not have vast knowledge or deep understanding, that I am really fundamentally lost, that there is a longing in me that no story can ever satisfy. I get to the end of the story and I gotta tell another one. So I have this longing, can't find what I'm looking for. And this fundamental loneliness and frustration with the way that other people treat us. But when we look at ourselves, we understand that whether we like it or not, our world is designed in such a way that we are driven by this hunger, this desire that is fundamentally selfish. Now, and I don't mean that in necessarily a negative way. It's just a fact. Even when I do something kind, I do it because I think it's the best thing for me. I mean, I choose kindness because I find it to be so much more satisfying. Being a jerk kind of stinks. So I try not to be a jerk, and most people try not to be a jerk. But it's not because we are unselfish. It's because we understand that that's the most rich and satisfying way to be. So those are, these three facts that we have to face. And in the face of my lostness, I choose wonder. And in the face of my longing, I choose acceptance. In the face of my loneliness and the realization that this world is red in tooth and claw, I choose compassion. But it doesn't stop there. And here's the thing I'm trying to get to today. Adding that third dimension to our existence, entering into a life beyond belief, beyond story, is not an escape. It's not like, oh, I'm just going to float off to this happy place where there is no story. I'm still a creature living in a story, and I have desires, but it changes the way I look at the story. So I want to just quickly sort of share with you how facing up affects the way I think about what's going on in this world right now. The way that this third dimension, this understanding that I am a human being, affects the way that I look at what's going on with our nation right now, which really does trouble me. So, okay, let's look at the fact that we are lost. So that to me gives me a freedom to understand that my story is not absolute. It instantly frees me from dogma. When I'm putting forth my story, I'm not putting forth reality, capital R. I understand that. I'm just asking the question, what's a good game? What's a good adventure? What allows us as a species to operate together, to allow each person to be what they are to the full extent that they can be? How can a person freely how can we interact with each other in a way that allows the maximum level of freedom and adventure for each person? And clearly, any dogma, whether it's religious, political, whatever, it just blows that apart. Well, let's look at the second thing, the fact that I'm longing, and my specter for this is vanitas, right? I'm and to try not to go into the whole thing here, but okay, I can't find what I'm looking for. Well, that in a way is liberating because I'm no longer fighting for like I'm no longer fighting for the millennium, for this golden age. It's not, I'm not trying to bring in the Third Reich. I understand that whatever story I tell is not going to be the one that issues in paradise for everybody. We're not going to get there. So the question is not how does my story, which is the story, capital R with truth and the whole thing, justice in the American way, how does that usher in a golden age for everyone? Because I know that no story will do that. The question is, how do we play together? How do we work together to create a society where people are free to interact with each other and enjoy being alive together? Letting go of this idea that we're going to usher in, the millennial kingdom where whether it's Jesus coming back and making everything perfect, or the Republicans taking charge, or the Democrats taking charge, or whoever's going to step in and fix everything, that's going to happen. It's not going to happen. If we could just let that go and relax about our stories and just loosen up. Um, so it's the idea is that it's not facing up is not an abandonment of the story. It's a new way of looking at the story, a lighter way of holding it. And then the third specter, the Rapax, this idea that we feel alone, we feel threatened in this world, and you got to stick up for yourself. And there are bullies on the playground. How are we going to get along? Well, you can't just surrender to bullies. So facing up does not mean, well, I'm just going to lie down and just let the bully pound me in the face. I The Hunger Games is really a really great illustration of, I think, how we respond to bullies. And Katniss in that story is the reason she is so compelling as a character is because she resists this idea that we just have to fight to win. And if you, there's only winners and losers, and she's trying to, compassion for the little girl Rue, remember, and then the triumph scene in the end where, she and Peeta, I guess, would rather eat the poisonous berries than kill each other. I mean, it's just no, I will not, I will not. Just sink to that level of pure predation. Their compassion and kindness are a much richer way to live. I'd rather die than to just enter a world where I'm just tearing people limb to limb with no compassion, with no kindness. But no, notice, Katniss will kill, will shoot, will defend herself. It's not like she's not resisting, but it's without this sort of self-righteous I've got this story that's going to fix everything. It's just like, no, I'm not going to participate in this bloodbath. And again, not because I'm better than anybody, but because it's a miserable way to live. So I'm getting ready actually right now. The reason I'm shooting this today on my iPhone in a really simple way is getting ready to go out and test some gear out in the woods. I got some waterproof stuff. So I'm going on a backpacking trip, and it's supposed to just pour rain the whole time. So I want to see how miserable it is. So I'll have a pretty interesting video, I think, for you next week. And I also will have time on the trail to maybe reflect a little bit more about this stuff. But I guess, the main thing I want to say today is just that facing up is not just a happy place to go to. I sometimes put things through what I call like the Auschwitz test, or And it's the idea is that if this won't work in a concentration camp, then it's useless. And partly because if you've ever read Camus' book, The Plague, there's a city Oran where there's this plague and everybody is, stuck in this, and it's this picture of our lives. We're stuck on this planet. Everybody's going to die. How do you live? How do you deal with this situation? Auschwitz is obviously just beyond the pale. Oron, though, is surprisingly similar, and Oron, this idea that we're trapped together on this in this ball we can't escape, and we're all going to die, it's like surprisingly resonates, surprisingly similar to our day-to-day existence. So if it doesn't work there, it doesn't work. And so facing up, my goal is not to come up with an escape, but an embrace of life, a way to live in a world where there is lostness, where we experience longing that can't be satisfied, where there is loneliness that we experience, in this frustration and friction, not just with each other, but with the world around us. When I go up there, I'll be wondering, are there mountain lions? What's that sound I hear over there? Like you just very much remember when you're out in the wilderness that you're not just a predator, you are also prey. I hope this year will be one where I will take some big steps toward not just coming up with a conceptual theory, but really living it out and demonstrating that. That's what the Light Beyond Belief, that's what this series, Living It Up, is all about. I would love to engage with any of you who have thoughts on this. Please feel free to make comments if you're watching this on YouTube. Of course, the best thing to do would be to sign up for the club and join a group that is, like really going into it. Once a month we meet, so just to remind you of that. I look forward to hearing more, seeing you a little bit more down the trail.